Psychological operations, or Psyops, are operations to convey selected information and indicators to audiences to influence their emotions, motives, and objective reasoning, and ultimately the behaviour of governments, organisations, groups, and individuals.
Danger our adversaries are posing to us in space. The need for more cyber to protect us in cyberspace. More SIGINT, more electronic warfare, and special operations capabilities. Alongside considerations of our defence posture, technology will always be a key feature, and therefore it's going to be heart of our integrated review. As our adversaries strive to whittle away our leading edge, we need to modernise faster, getting ahead of the curve in everything from space and cyberspace to AI and big data. We are still in the early days of the review. There is plenty more to come.
Here's a report from the UK Parliament's website. It's a Select Committee on Defence report, and the opening paragraph says, "Victory is rarely achieved purely through the destruction of an adversary's material. The key is to destroy an adversary's will to fight. Info Ops is the primary means by which will and the ability to impose will and exercise command is attacked."
And we've been involved with the Cabinet Office Rapid Response Unit, with our 77 Brigade helping to quash rumours from misinformation, but also to counter disinformation.
With our 77 Brigade helping to quash rumours from misinformation, but also to counter disinformation.
The 77th Brigade's website says, and I quote, "The brigade is an agent of change. Through targeted information activity and outreach, we contribute to the success of military objectives in support of commanders, whilst reducing the cost in casualties and resources." And there are 6 separate groups operating within the 77th Brigade, so we'll take a look at a couple of those groups. The Defence Cultural Specialist Unit provides intelligence support to the information activities, and the page goes on to say that it assists the brigade and wider defence by building an understanding of the physical, virtual and cognitive behaviours of audiences, actors and adversaries. And they list a couple of things they specialise in: target audience analysis, human terrain analysis, cultural and linguistic advice. The next group we'll take a look at is the Digital Operations Group, and they say that they provide a specialist capability to deliver influence activity and products across a broad range of communication channels. And there are 2 teams, the Web Ops team and the production team. The Web Ops team collects information and understands audience sentiments in the virtual domain, and they may engage with audiences in order to influence perceptions to support operational outcomes. So you may well have run into a 77th in a chat room or in a comment section. And then the production team design and create video, audio, print and digital products that aim to influence behaviours for both the army and external audience. Additionally, they advise on campaign strategy and provide innovative behavioural change methods. And then you have the Operational Media and Communications Group, and primarily they're made up of Army reservists, and they collect and analyse media content, and they can deploy combat cameras, whatever they are, and communication operations officers to support defence strategic communications. They've got large teams of photographers, videographers, journalists, marketing specialists, media minders, social media specialists, digital content specialists, and media monitoring. Tobias Elwood is an MP and frequent guest on all mainstream media channels. He's often outspoken and is seen here challenging the government's ability to handle a crisis. He forecasts the gloomy future.
My concern is this is a huge order for putting strain on our NHS. Our attitude has always been one last push and we're going to get out the woods. But let's not forget that 40% of the world is still unvaccinated and another mutation is really likely. And we need to change this mindset from planning in weeks or months to years. We're likely to need a fourth, fifth or sixth jab in readiness for further waves. And my criticism actually is more wider, is the government's ability to do crisis management. The government machine, however well-intentioned, has not adapted to handling and enduring emergency. We're still using the same old cabinet construct. It's tried, it's tested, but it's too slow, it's too siloed in its decision-making. If we created a Brexit department and a climate change department to deal with those issues, why not create one to deal with this pandemic? It's 2 years gone. We've got another 2 years to go at least.
So here we have a serving MP that is also a reservist senior officer. It does beg the question, who is this elected member of parliament serving? His constituents or his senior commanders within the 77th Brigade?
What's interesting is it's been very much a whole force, not just of regular military from all the three services, but reservists as well. Some 15% of the force has been reservists. It's involved defence civilians, defence contractors, scientists from Porton Down, and something called the Engineer and Logistics Staff Corps, where we bring in people from industry who work inside the military in times of crisis and provide expert support for how we might link into the civilian community to bring forward skills and indeed industrial support.
SAGE is the Scientific Advisory Group for Emergencies, and they provide scientific and technical advice to support government decision makers during emergencies. Their website goes on to say that SAGE is responsible for ensuring that timely and coordinated scientific advice is made available to decision makers to support UK cross-government decisions in Cabinet Office Briefing Room. Susan Mitchie is Professor of Health Psychology and Director of the Centre for Behaviour Change at University College London. Her LinkedIn profile says that she serves as an expert advisor on the UK Scientific Pandemic Insights Group on Behavioural Science for COVID-19, the Lancet, which is the medical journal, COVID-19 Commission, and a member of the UK's independent SAGE. She also serves on the World Health Organisation's Behavioural Insights and Science Technical Advisory Group and is chair of the UK Food Standard Agency Advisory Committee for Social Science. She too makes frequent appearances on mainstream news channels, and here is one such appearance where she airs her views on what the future should look like for the British public.
Do you think that this is going to be right? We've had so much hope on the vaccines, hopefully changing everything, bringing an end to the pandemic, bringing an end to these changes we've had in our lives. Do you think it won't be enough?
Vaccines are a really important part of the pandemic control, but it's only one part. Test, trace and isolate system, border controls are really essential. And the third thing is people's behaviour. That is the behaviour of social distancing, of when you're indoors, making sure there's good ventilation, or if there's not, wearing face masks, and hand and surface hygiene. We'll need to keep these going in the long term, and that will be good not only for COVID, but also to reduce other.
So when you say long term, sorry to interrupt, Professor Mickey. When you say long term, what do you mean by that? How long? Very quickly.
I think forever.
Forever. I think forever.
Susan Mitchie is a member of the Communist Party for Britain and was also a member of its predecessor, the Communist Party of Great Britain. Her husband is also a member of the Communist Party and a great advocate for Jeremy Corbyn. This does beg the question, why is a vocal supporter of China and its communist regime so intent on keeping the British public under restrictions forever? As a key member of SAGE and other behavioural change group, where do this Communist Party's members' loyalties lie. And whilst we're on Twitter, take a look at this character. Gordon Macmillan. He's the senior Twitter executive with editorial responsibility for the Middle East. And an online publication, the Middle East Eye, has established that he's also a part-time officer in the British Army's Psychological Warfare Unit. It appears that the 77th Brigade populates some senior, influential positions in both government and the private sector. The Independent Scientific Pandemic Insights Group on Behaviours, or SPI-B for short, the government website says the following about them. SPI-B provides behavioural science advice aimed at anticipating and helping people adhere to interventions that are recommended by medical or epidemiological experts. SPI provides independent expert behavioural science advice to the Scientific Advisory Group for Emergencies, otherwise known as SAGE, which in turn advises ministers and officials across government. And it goes on to say that participants come from leading fields of both academia and industry. And here we see an article from The Telegraph in May 2021. The article outlined how SPI-B warned in March that ministers needed to increase the perceived level of personal threat from COVID-19 because a substantial number of people still did not feel sufficiently personally threatened. Scientists on a committee that encouraged the use of fear to control people's behaviour during the COVID pandemic have admitted its work was unethical and totalitarian. And members of the Scientific Pandemic Influenza Group on Behavioural Change expressed regret about the tactics. Gavin Morgan, a psychologist on the team, said, "Clearly using fear as a means of control is not ethical. Using fear smacks of totalitarianism. It's not an ethical stance for any modern government." Ministers have faced repeated accusations that they ramped up the threat from the pandemic to justify lockdowns and coerce the public into abiding by them. It's reported that the claim will be examined by the forthcoming public inquiry into the pandemic response. And here's another article. This one was just recently in January 2022 in the Mail Online. It says ministers have used propagandistic tactics to scare public into complying with COVID rules. The co-founder of the Nudge Unit has accused the government of using scare tactics to get people to follow COVID rules during the pandemic. Behavioural scientist Simon Rudd suggested there's been an overemphasis on modelling and data that he warned was propaganda. Writing in the magazine, he said fear was initially used to boost public compliance during the first lockdown, but had been carried right through the crisis. That fear, he says, seems to have subsequently driven policy decisions in a worrying feedback loop. In a time of so much misinformation and fear-mongering, we must remember that we humans are in the majority, and that all it takes to stop these demons is for each of us, one by one, to stand up and say no.
There was that ant that stood up to me.
Yeah, but we can forget about him.
Yeah, it was just one ant. One ant.
Yeah, you're right. It's just one ant.
Yeah, boss, they're puny.
Puny? Say, let's pretend this grain is a puny little ant. Did that hurt?
Nope.
Well, how about this one?
Are you kidding?
Well, how about this? You let one ant stand up to us, then they all might stand up. Those puny little ants outnumber us 100 to 1.
And if they ever figure that out, there goes our way of life. It's not about food. It's about keeping those ants in line.